many more endeavors that he plans to accomplish. And so I'm always delighted to hear from Cristino and hear about the new things that he's embarking on. So Cristino is a graduate alumnus through the Adelphi University School of Social Work and a licensed master social worker in the state of New York. He is currently the program coordinator for the Nassau County District Attorney's Community Partnership Program, a partnership program between the Nassau County District Attorney's Office and the Family and Children's Association, a nonprofit organization overseeing youth-based programs, justice involved programs, community engagement, and immigrant community services. In addition, Cristino is also hold a position as a bilingual psychotherapist through the Mental Health Providers of Western Queens, Western Queens Consultation Center in Sunnyside, Queens, New York, where he provides therapy for English and Spanish-speaking patients, regardless of immigration status, ranging from children, adolescents, and adults through a cognitive, behavioral, and cultural approach. So that was a mouthful, and Cristino will be talking today about COVID-19 and the impact that it has on the criminal justice system. So thank you, Cristino, for joining us, and I shall now turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. I just was saying earlier that the experience at Delphi, I guess, would have to be like the epitome for where I'm at today with my career and what I do, and the passion I have for the individuals I serve in the community. So I definitely have to give it like an endless amount of thank yous to the School of Social Work, and definitely Schanica for always being there in the office when I was stopped by. So yes, definitely the wonderful news like pop-ups that we get with COVID-19 has been so interesting. Especially now, we see a lot of news, information coming on the news channels about education, about healthcare, about resources, social service situations like and also employment. One thing that's been present but not spoken much about is actually how this pandemic has been affecting the criminal justice system, and it has been doing a lot, especially here, um, especially in New York City and the Long Island region, Nassau and Suffolk County. So it's been very interesting watching that kind of reveal itself in different forms. I know we've been seeing a big number of cases coming through in New York City, in Nassau County, Suffolk County, and a big number of deaths have been coming up. So that's something that keep in mind. Also understanding like what percentages those numbers are broken into. A good number within each of the cases that are that have been discovered and deaths that have popped up also include individuals who are incarcerated because of the controlled setting that these individuals are in. It's very, very, very easy to get to obtain the virus and pass it on. But there have been many changes in different areas, so like the correction centers, the courts, supervision, and this virus, in a way, aside from having an impact on the facilities and organizations that make up the criminal justice system, it also has a big impact on the offenders, the victims, and the community itself in different perspectives. So it's very interesting how we, as a program coordinator, kind of recognize like different areas in which this virus has hit. I work specifically in the village of Hempstead, so we're just 5 to 10 minutes away from Delphi's campus in Garden City. And a lot of what's happening with the virus, I would say, starting with correction centers, is how plan of releasing inmates has come up. I know that's I'm not sure if anyone's heard that in the news lately, but a major concern within the community is the release of inmates. That's kind of where a lot of the stigma comes up from. All offenders are deemed are deemed criminals, and their behavior is going to run loose. So the question is, what's the protocol? What's the process with individuals being released into the community? First, I would say, and keep in mind also, New York State recently just passed criminal justice reform. So that is already happening since January 1st, sorry, of this year. So before the pandemic hit, a lot of these changes in criminal justice regarding bail and discovery, all that is been something in the works. And then once the pandemic and quarantine hit, it kind of made it much more pressuring for a lot of facilities and courthouses. So coming just back to the protocol, it's interesting. Well, for one, I usually like to use the term, the aspect that a lot of individuals who are incarcerated are going to be released. It was always important to understand having protocols that follow with individuals being released from a correction center, whether it's prison, whether it's a local jail, is being able to understand, okay, this person's and just like simply just let them out. And there has been some loopholes in that, which made it difficult for individuals who are being released to be able to find services they need. Now, with the necessity of releasing inmates to reduce the risks and of passing the virus, state corrections officials are responding with the virus by releasing first a lot of inmates who have not committed any felony offenses or sex offenses. They, especially women who are pregnant and postpartum. So with the discharge, a lot of women who are deemed eligible and men who are deemed eligible are going to follow through with being discharged from these centers, and also being able to follow through a reentry protocol, housing, with services and resources in the community, so that they can both be discharged and be able to find some, be able to stay safe, like have a safety net. And in the jails, are those who are not eligible to be released, looking into seeing that reducing jail admissions. I mean, prior to and before the pandemic started, there were the start of reducing jail admissions. Bail reform hit. People who weren't deemed eligible who were deemed eligible for bail were able to be released. And also like reducing contact with visitors and other things like eliminating medical copays. Those are simple little aspects of what we're seeing the pandemic have an effect in a correctional setting. A lot of the courts have restricted their contact and their engagement with individuals who are required to go to court for any session for hearings. This definitely has brought a concern between victims and community members. A lot of victims who feel like, okay, the pandemic's happening. I want to file a complaint, or I want to. I'm nervous. I can't get any form of. I want to report an incident. I'm nervous. This definitely is something that comes up with for example, a lot of women who and children who are experiencing domestic violence, sexual assault, child abuse, and neglect. So where the fear of being able to stay home because of the quarantine has put a sense of insecurity, a sense of fear, and the sense that there is no form of protection. So a lot of the courts, what they're doing is actually they've switched over to an electronic form of electronic system that can continue with filing. Courts are still taking place, but in the sense of looking at cases that are already open, and also being able to accept complaints and such, so that people can still follow through with filing a report if they need to. And definitely, and that's something that's coming up. Actually, it's May 6th. It actually just recently began on May 4th, and this was information through the New York Courts website. So a lot of what's happening within the courts, law enforcement, just think, because like I mentioned earlier, this kind of like trickles down into the offenders, the victims, the community. Because as of in a general perspective, all the residents and communities, the victims of crimes and the offenders of a crime, all in some way have a connection with each other. And with COVID, a lot of questions come up like, if I have protection, do I have resources? Do I feel safe where I'm located? Am I feeling safe in my own community? Is the need for me to do I feel like am I going to be in trouble? I can't go to court, or I can't see my probation officer, or I can't do what's required of me under a court order. Am I going to be penalized for that? Those are questions that come up. I've definitely seen it in my experience as a program coordinator, I work hand in hand with the Department of Probation, and I work specifically with the Families Division, where I work with several youth who are under probation and just are going through like a case management mentorship kind of aspect of engagement. And those are questions that come up, not just for the probationers, the youth that are enrolled, but also their parents. Many of them are single mother parents, like in a single mother homes, where the resources are pretty much very scarce. And then others who are court mandated is the fear of, I never got a word from my attorney. I'm nervous if I miss my court date or forgo for my arrest. So being able to stay, like, keeping everyone kind of like up to date with what's happening with the court system is something that's very interesting during these times. And definitely with victims who've come forth about, I don't have money for rent, I can't pay rent. If I don't pay rent, I'm going to be evicted from my home, or I like coming to help me with assistance. Especially during these times, a lot of people, especially undocumented communities, are noticing much more scamming is much more threats, harassment for contacting like officials like ICE have been very common, as much as it was before. But a lot of these instances are actually, as a matter of fact, are crimes. So we're starting to see more rises in concerns in high-risk communities, and in low communities, we're seeing how the virus doesn't have any form of differentiation between communities, but the instances of which we're seeing a lot of perspectives on it, we kind of could tell communities that the virus is affecting. So definitely in the community, in a offender's perspective, is the need of resources. As we are all aware, a lot of services, whether mental health services, medical services, are all now through Zoom or Google Hangouts, or some agencies may have their own form of telemedical or telehealth or mental health services. As much as it is available for individuals who do have a computer or a smartphone or an iPad, a tablet, many individuals in high-risk communities, low-income communities, actually find it very difficult to have that engagement. they don't have the funds to afford it. The same goes with education. Now we see that a lot of schools the rest of the school year are doing things virtually, just like as um, through like universities doing things through Zoom and video. Uh, a lot of school districts, especially low-funded school districts, are facing the scenario of which, yes, they're getting a good amount of funding, but the disparities in obtaining the needs of adjusting to the changes, as well as being able to obtain and receive a quality education, is something that is still happening. Um, and it's also just the barriers that exist in there. Do individuals have access to Wi-Fi, as simple as that, to individuals being able to communicate with professionals through a telephone or through a telehealth services, but the professional doesn't speak English. A lot of barriers are beginning to come up, which have been there in the past before all of this, if not, I could say even for years. But it is something that's becoming much more noticeable. It's almost like the elephant in the room that we kind of just know it's there, but we don't acknowledge it. But now the elephant's taking a step forward, and now we see it. So we're really seeing these disparities kind of come up in low income, high risk communities. Through a community perspective, so that was based on an offender perspective. Through a community perspective, it's interesting because, like I said before, the concern for re-entering offenders has come up. And the good thing is that there's a protocol their protocol is being currently constantly up to date, addressing the issues that community members may have with um, returning offenders. A lot of nonprofit organizations, a lot specifically working with justice involved community members, they are actually working hand in hand with court systems, with probation, parole, um, jails that they know they're having someone being released, so that they can appropriately have this the transition of whether incarcerated, I'm going through a discharge plan into, okay, I'm connected with somebody and I can get the help I need. So those are becoming much more, they're starting to, what used to be like silos before is now becoming more interconnected with each other. Organizations are nonprofit connecting with government organizations that are funded through the state or through the county. And we're trying to do our best to connect with that. Communities, like I mentioned before, undocumented communities have high concerns of engagements like ICE activity. Luckily, like I said, Nassau County hasn't had any reports of any ICE activity, but it is as much as the news can share that that there is activity, that's always something of fear that a lot of undocumented communities have. And this also, what I mean by undocumented communities or immigrant communities, I specifically don't see just Hispanic or Spanish-speaking communities. We do have a number of Caribbean community members, specifically from countries like Haiti, that live in Nassau County, specifically in Nassau. In New York City, of course, we have an abundance of diversity in different communities and races and ethnicities that exist. So definitely, it comes different. That scare is very pretty much existent, and there's definitely a lot of issues regarding very recent activity on social media, but in different communities involving racial disparities and racial targeting regarding law enforcement. So that's something that just comes up across communities, especially specifically Black communities and communities of color. So it's like the issue with COVID is kind of, I would say, kind of unraveling itself of situations that have been happening for decades, if not centuries. But it kind of gives us like a overview of the situation, like how that kind of simply just turning on the TV channel and watching the news, we can kind of see how this virus is seen differently in different communities, whether it's regarding race, whether it's class, socioeconomic status, etc. But luckily, a lot of a lot of organizations, especially in Nassau County, in New York City, organizations such as like the the Bar Association, so this is like the Hispanic Bar Association of Long Island, are a lot, and other legal services are standing up in these situations to do as much as they can on their part to provide legal services. Some from what I believe, but I don't want to say that okay I know, but it's that some services are free. Consultation is free. So it's definitely important to recognize that yes, a lot of situations are coming up that are whether it's criminal activity or a violation of your rights. A lot of legal organizations are coming together to provide the service that we as community members and citizens have the right to receive. And in the victim's perspective, it's definitely something like I mentioned before, the increase in domestic violence, child abuse, and neglect, the fear of being home with your perpetrator, or children who are being like a lot of teachers are noticing the circumstances under which the students or the children live in, kind of like the video conferencing or classrooms through a camera gives teachers and social workers, myself, I've seen it, you get a glimpse of these the homes that our patients or the students live in. So it kind of brings a lot of questions and definitely a lot of concerns. A lot of organizations that work primarily in these instances, there are several organizations in Long Island, some in New York City, that provide services for victims of domestic violence, sex trafficking, abuse, neglect, and etc. Those are services that are being more aware of these instances and being able to connect to organizations if reports do come in. And it's something definitely as a social worker that we kind of have to, we're well aware of the mandates as a state to be, as we are mandated reporters, as well as any other professionals that work with generally children, are, it is something that kind of sticks into for me personally, into my head when I'm working with my patients. I work with several youth under the ages of 10 and some under the ages of 15. And it's always the question, is there anything that sticks out that I need to be conscious of, I have to be aware of? Is there any differences in the patient's behavior, or if it's with the adolescents I work with in probation, am I noticing any changes in their well-being? And it's something that comes up. So this is a perspective through a social worker from me personally, and many others who are in the social work program are eager to get, and I would say this experience is something definitely going to be needed. I would say I kind of see it as like the silver lining in the storm. Like this is a situation, this pandemic has given us the opportunity to see what we need to get a grasp of. For social workers, it's definitely the need of mental health services. Definitely what we're going to expect after this pandemic is a lot of situations where depression, is that even going on right now, depression, anxiety, uh, burnout. And as we mentioned, like we kind of been going through Zoom meetings or Google Hangout meetings or class settings on video. But when is it too much? Like when are we seeing too much? So for social workers in this field, especially involving criminal justice, our work is interesting because as much as our work is hands-on and in person, and now being through video, it kind of cuts off the relationship that we may have with our clients or our patients. When an individual is released from a correction center, the organization I work for, the program I work for, sorry, we have individuals walking in who have been referred to us by like the courts or prison or um, their probation officer or parole officer. And these are individuals who may have served 30 years, 40 years, 50 years upstate. And for them, like seeing an iPad, what is an iPhone? What is an iPad? What is this what is this laptop in front of me? Um, Last time I was able to get resources, I went down to the Department of Social Services to simply apply for it. But now it's everything done through media. I have no clue of what's going on. And aside from being unaware of the changes in technology and services and coverage, there's also the kind of like that shock of I just stepped out of a place I've been for half my life. And now I'm trying to figure out what is going to happen. Um, the saying is the number showed that individuals who've recently been incarcerated and do not have any form of support are 60% chance of returning back to prison. So, so that with that said, for us in social workers in criminal justice settings, it's just be able to draw that connection through video is not the same as in person. Our reactions are not the same whether with the individuals we work with, and most definitely is the trust that we try to establish with our clients. My organization, my program is actually we're like I said, we're a partnership with Family and Children Association, which is a nonprofit organization in Nassau County, and what we aim to do is provide the resources. But as easy as it is to provide resources for individuals, whether it's youth or that are on probation, parole, or in juvenile detention centers, or it is adults at the correction center out in East Meadow, the one thing that comes to mind is trust. And this is where the virus kind of impacts that trust. Is at this moment, a lot of people, I don't really, they'll mention to us, like, I don't really care about service. I just need food. I just need resources. So what do we do as social workers? We adjust. We put our thinking caps. All right, we need to figure out what's gonna happen. All right, so and so is holding a food drive. Being able to be that advocate on the feet. Like, this is like I would say in my career, in social service, mental health, this has been like one of the moments in my career that I've kind of seen myself like running all over the place. Um, and that's okay. It's also something that we don't have control over. That's something that's very difficult for a lot of individuals, not just only in the criminal justice system, who are either working in the system or a part of the system, but as a community as a whole, including all of us present today. It's like this situation, and what we kind of like, try to reach for is control, and that's something that I guess have come to the conclusion that we don't have control of the situation, but what we do have control is our actions, are also our self-care and being able to take care of ourselves. I know for a fact that a lot of this is definitely traumatic, but being able to work together is something that's very important, and that's something that I preach to the clients I work with, the community members I work with, the patients I work with, is being able to understand what you can control and what you can't control. For individuals who are on probation and parole, being able to understand that you can't go to a place that's closed. What you can do is be able to follow up with the resources that you're connected to. And luckily, a lot of people on probation and parole or going through the process are now being able to get connected with resources in the community that's available for them. So it's definitely something that we are mobilizing more faster than before. And for what I could say, as hectic as the work is like I said before, it's always important to take care of yourself, because we are also people too. and it's something I've had to learn, not just as a student, while I was a student at Adelphi, but also like now I'm just it's very the existence of secondhand trauma, secondary trauma or compassion fatigue is very, very, very real. And as much as we see it in the work we do, especially in communities that are high risk and low income, um, it's hard to believe that it exists, but it does. So it's something that I would say my experience with COVID-19 and the criminal justice system, it's a lot has been revealed, and unfortunately, I gotta say, not everything has been exposed yet, because there's always something happening that's coming up through whether it is Channel 12 or Instagram or Facebook. Uh, we're seeing things come up more. But the good thing is that I would say there are resources and organizations that are going to the front lines of being able to um, address those concerns, advocate for the folks that need it most, being able to address a lot of the misinformation that's going on in the communities through social media. As we see a lot of information going across what we see on computer screens, on our phones. And the question comes to as well as we understand what is being presented to us, does the person next to me understand what's being presented to us? Does the person on the right, does the person on my left understand what information is coming up from this pandemic? And that's where a lot of confusion takes place. So it's very, like I said, it's very interesting to me, especially going on with it now. So
Okay. So I think, on that note, Christino, I'd like to open it up for folks to ask questions or give any comments or thoughts. But first and foremost, again, thank you for that great presentation. I found it, to be very enlightening. I guess, I'm more compelled to understanding, more about, the women and of
mhm,
course, them having to return, back into a community which may be very foreign,
yeah,
right, for them, depending upon how long they've been incarcerated, and so having to resume, motherhood, those child care taking
mhm,
responsibilities and serving possibly of head of household, and of course, the likelihood of many being released without any transitional
yeah,
services. So that's kind of, my thought in terms of the impact,
mhm.
COVID certainly, presents there. But for those of you, here this evening, any thoughts, any questions that you have for Christino?
Christina, I don't know if you can touch upon this, but how has COVID-19 affected the juvenile detention centers?
So because of the restrictions of visitation, a lot of the youth that are there presently may not have the opportunities to actually have face-to-face visitation. Family courts are still in function, and cases are still being run through that are required. But the actual face-to-face is something very, very restricted on for court purposes. Only employees that work through the courts have access to the building. With the juvenile detention center, it's the same. It's pretty much whoever works there because it is a public servant employed, and it's also a government employment. So but like I said, visitation is very, very is restricted. As of now, I don't believe they're having visitations because of the virus. Until we get a confirmation of when quarantine ends and um, things go back to normal functioning, then those situations will change. But for the safety of the children that are there, because the juvenile detention center is not like the correction center up the block in East Meadow, different restrictions, different organizations to the government that are that are kind of overseeing things. So it's a different role, but definitely for all current correction centers, visitations are suspended.
Thank you.
Hi, Christina, thank you for your presentation. How are the ex-offenders dealing with the court system? Do you know, are they going to court still or no? Are they?
So yeah, sorry. So it's interesting. So when we initially had the news go out about being in quarantine, cases that were scheduled for April, I've had several individuals who were scheduled to go to court in April for checkups, and those hearings were adjourned. Because the court system didn't have an idea of how to address the individuals coming in for the hearings, many of them were adjourned actually for May, for this month. And if there is the continuation of the quarantine, let's say for an example, May 15 comes, but the governor believes that there needs to be a continuation of quarantine to reduce the risk here downstate. Depending on the courts, the Unified Court System, which is the New York courts, the court organization responsible for all courthouses across the state, they can determine, okay, we're going to continue to adjourn the cases from May into June. Means that whatever you were scheduled to attend in May, we'll send a letter out to the offenders and the defendants, and they will come in June instead of May. Or attorneys may be contacted to tell them, okay, your case has been adjourned for the following month because of this reason or so. So the responsibility goes on behalf of the courts to notify the offenders or the attorneys that represent them, or the prosecutor kind of is overseeing that case for that moment. So, but court cases that are in trial, I know for a fact, I know grand jury cases have been suspended. But other trials that are going through the courts are done. Some judges have done theirs virtually. So as much as the Zoom conferencing has been pretty much adjusted to providers like mental health providers in clinics or teachers, the same systems like these are also being used in systems like courts.
Okay, yeah, I'm interested to know more about that because my field placement is with the Public Defender's Office in Poughkeepsie. So I'm very curious I'm just waiting. I haven't called anyone. I'm just waiting to hear what you have to say to me. But that's why it's really great to have an opportunity to hear about your experience, because I'm wondering, what's that like? Are you interacting with clients and patients at all, or are you strictly Zoom now?
So I don't have any personal like face-to-face engagement for now. We're still waiting to be notified as to when it's best. And we in a lot of nonprofit organizations want to ensure that our clients or our patients are not at risk, because as much as it's a risk for us, it is a risk for them as well. We do conferences through Zoom, through phone. It's always important when we're working with individuals, whether it is clients or patients in a community setting or public defenders setting, to be mindful of the client or the patient. As much as this situation is very hectic and it involves all of us, we also in the situation, we care for the clients that we serve, the patients that we serve. So being mindful of, hey, do you feel like contacting you through a Zoom is appropriate for you or best feel comfortable for you? Do you feel that being able to contact through phone? For me personally, I always make sure I ask whoever I'm working with if Zoom's okay. Some parents Zoom is good because they want to be able to see me face to face. especially when engaging with adolescents that are enrolled to our program. A lot of the young adults that are court mandated feel like calling is best. They don't feel like being videotaped or do Zoom, and that's their right as a client. So, and some kids I work with, they hate phone calls, or don't feel comfortable with phone calls, especially disclosing information that's private and personal. A lot of the situations, I would say, with social work, as much as telehealth, and telemental health services, your phone is somewhat new. HIPAA still applies, and much of HIPAA is interesting because a lot of like services and privacy and confidentiality, the restrictions exist, but we're so used to knowing them about them in what we do in contact with and persons by phone call. But video is something new. And so a lot of changes with the structure of HIPAA regulations and privacy and how to follow up with services is kind of adjusting to the situation as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that about, because I heard I attended another webinar, and an educator principal of the school said that. I thought that was so important. He said, you have to ask, it's very important to ask people how they want to be communicated within this pandemic environment. And I really appreciate what you said.
Yeah.
That empower, because it's like you said, the privacy issue.
Yeah. That's definitely important. A lot of individuals, I would say, that are in correction centers or on probation and parole or juvenile detention centers or probation, anybody that's involved with the justice system. Mental health exists, like mental illnesses exist in those populations. Most likely or high likely, a lot of individuals are experiencing severe trauma, PTSD, mood disorders, depression, anxiety. Those diagnoses are very, very common, including others. I know I've worked with several youth who have been diagnosed with ADHD, and being able to recognize those behaviors definitely instills a lot of fear. And it's definitely specific there's other factors too that have been aspects that I've had to learn myself, especially when it comes to community members and law enforcement during these specific times. So that was something that I had to learn myself, and aspects of my patients or my clients' racial background, ethnic background, being able to determine their reactions to what's happening as well as their reactions to law enforcement, determining how issues that have come up with individuals who feel like they're not getting the services they are entitled to. Those situations, all that it's very important. That all comes at pretty much explosion of factors and aspects of or perspectives of a person can change for the better or for worse. If that initial contact with a patient or a client is not either it involves them and you asking them, do you prefer me speaking to you through phone? Do you prefer me speaking to you through a video conference? Do you prefer texting you? Which is your preference? And that simple question can either, like I said, be a better or worse in those aspects have a factor in that question. So it's interesting, but it's definitely very important in mindfulness of patient client.
Can I ask you another question?
Yeah, of course.
You mentioned that some of the resources are closed. So how are high-risk individuals dealing with, programs that are closed?
So a lot of programs, office-wise, have closed when quarantine started taking place. And as time went on, I know currently several organizations are having workers or having minimal amount of workers returning back to the clinics or community centers or organizations. So that's a good thing. One thing that they're now focusing on is telehealth services, being able to promote video conferencing or phone calls or texting to, uh, to their clients and or patients. So that's something that is starting to open up in this, become much more accessible for community members and who are receiving services and resources. And other resources are being developed in collaboration with organizations. I know some organizations are working together to address issues. I know in Long Island, for example, a lot of towns like the town of Hempstead is working in collaboration with Long Island Harvest to establish food distribution sites. So some services and some resources are open to the public, but with minimal engagement. And that what I mean by that is having a certain amount of individuals come to a location, or some locations are closed, but are closed physically, but open remotely, and engagement will be continuing through those uh, methods until we get the okay, because we really want, and we often inform our patients or clients, hey, I know you need to come in and see us, but and we want to see you too, but because of the high risk of you stepping out of home or taking the risk of going into public, um, we want to make sure that you're safe, and we also want to make sure that everyone around you is safe. So it's being able to present that to an individual. So ideally, like, a lot of things are kind of slowly returning. I would think in phases. It's kind of like things are going back to being able to function in office. But as of now, a lot of organizations are doing services remotely. And if you ever go to an organization's website, they may have a section on top of the website that may have a COVID kind of information about their organization and how they're responding to COVID. And definitely a lot of county-based websites. I know for Nassau County and New York City, they have in their government-based website, they may have a list of resources for individuals who need to have specific contacts. A lot of community centers are doing the same thing too, so that we have an idea of what organizations are present and functioning during these times.
Thank you, Christina. Any other questions from anyone?
That's all.
Jonathan?
Yes.
Shalita, I'm sorry. Shalita, you may have to get Christina's email. That you need a one-on-one. Go ahead, Jonathan.
I believe, well, thank you for your work being on the front lines and being an essential worker and your advocacy. So I just wanted to thank you for that. And just to clarify, are the youth currently still in the facilities, or they've been moved back home?
Well, from now, I know, depending, because of the facility itself, I would say for Long Island, it's not that, it's, there's several beds, so it's not like different correction centers are different. Like Rikers Island may have, or New York City juvenile detention may have a couple, a large number of juveniles currently incarcerated. In Long Island, it's very, very minimal. It's a 12-bed location, so it's very interesting. Depending on cases, like I said before, felony offenses, sex offenses, the sexual charges, those are instances that are deemed to remain. In some cases are, depending on the courts, pretty much all youth that are that go through the who are at the detention center, it's per case, and it depends on the judge. If the judge feels that the person should be released, if the judge feels that they can move on to, or if the person is on probation, they're perhaps may have other jurisdictions. A lot of court officials are moving towards like the monitoring through GPS bracelets, which have been used before. It definitely is somewhat used with probation, but individual and pretty much it's like almost like it's generally individuals going to house arrest if they are released as a part of the protocol, or determining whether or not the judge, whatever they decide to do, is usually what comes up first. So numbers change kind of regularly, so it depends on the individual themselves and the crime they commit.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Fran.
I guess I'm gonna have to go, but I have one more question. I mean, I want your can you please give me your email?
Of course.
Okay, great. You mentioned stigma, and I'm wondering about testing. Are the individuals tested when they come out of the facilities before they come back into their communities?
So yeah, a lot of so from what I received, and the information I receive is or look into when it comes to like learning more about this instance. They are accessible to the public. There are websites like vera.org, V as in Victor, ERA.org. It's an organization that provides research on in the criminal justice system, whether immigration, juvenile justice, criminal justice, all that, those and the numbers and statistics, especially here in New York. And they offer a lot of resources and references that I would say is like a godsend, because it's very important if you're working with the individuals that are in the criminal justice system and how they're going through the situation too. But I definitely found from that, and as well as like New York State court system, they do get testing, and all coverages from medical co-pays for medical visits are eliminated. So they are getting, if they have to get any tests done, not just for this, but any medical services in the correction centers, those fees are eliminated.
Okay.
Oh, and to let everyone, my email, so I don't just before I forget. So it's C Chavez, so CCHA V as in Victor, E Z as in zebra, 7 right after the Z, at OPTONLINE.org. Oh, .net, sorry. It was optonline.net. So you could if you have any other questions like that you specifically have, definitely you could definitely send me an email. I'm the researcher type, so I love learning more information. Anything that can help that helps the general public. I like to stay informed as much as they are informed, because to all information that we have the right to access. And as much as it is a crucial time in our living history, we have to make the best in terms of us letting our neighbors know, okay, this is what I found out, and this is the resources that I'm getting about this. Some people need it more than others, but it's definitely important to be notified and being able to obtain your information from reliable and viable resources, especially since we're living in an environment where a lot of information is being spread, but a lot of information is not coming from locations that are deemed trusted. So it's always important to know where you get your information from.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thanks for being on the front line.
Thank you so much.
I agree.
Bye.
So on that note, everyone, if you have any remaining burning questions, certainly you can email me as well, and I can forward you, Christino's, email address. But Christino, again, I really want to wholeheartedly say thank you, for extending your time, this wonderful presentation. Always find the work that you do very, very intriguing. And as I always say, regardless of the length of time, that we're on this world or we're in this field of social work, learning never ends, right? It's always continuous. And so, as you continue to get information, please, feel free to funnel it through, the rest of us. And
definitely.
like you said, self-care, is critical. And so I advise each and every one
Yep.
of us to engage in that best of our ability. And
Exactly.
again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Of
We really
course.
appreciate it. You are just a wealth of information this evening.
No, of course, it's always a pleasure of mine. I'm more than happy to share. I mean, definitely self-care, like New York's Governor Cuomo mentioned, Headspace. And anyone who hasn't tried it, definitely use it. It is important. It's a free. It's for New York's residents. It's free. I use it like every night. My phone reminds me of using it. It's important. And then definitely for students is like, this is something I tell everybody who's a social worker, and I still tell colleagues I graduated with, that I'm close with. Social work, as much as we work with our patients, our clients in a one-on-one setting, group work, individual counseling, family counseling, couples therapy, all of that. Social work is beyond that. And this instance with this this pandemic happening, it's important to recognize how COVID-19 is impacting not just our patients individually or their families, but also communities and groups in the communities, and also nationwide, and what legislations, what policies are being passed from the president's desk to your local governor or your local county executive. Those are really important, especially at this time, because it's what I always see is that, and criminal justice as a fine example, is what comes across a Senate or a Congress, whether state or nationwide, and gets passed, impacts the community, impacts groups in the community, and it may and definitely will impact your patients, your clients, their families. So as everything interconnects, it's always important to know the macro, the meso, and the micro practices of social work, because to be efficient and I would say full functioning social worker, being able to understand all of that and see the connections between that, it helps you, it helps your patients, and it also helps the communities you want to serve.
All righty. Thank you for the parting gift.
Of
Thank
course.
you so much.
Okay, everyone.
I learned a lot.
Stay safe, everyone.
Thank
Thank you. It was very informative. Definitely learned.
Thank you so much.
It was.
All righty.
Have a good
Stay
evening.
well and be safe.
Thank you.
Likewise.
Bye-bye.